Hello, I'm Seljuk Turks and welcome to my Seljuk Turks faction guide for Medieval 2 Total War. Today we'll be discussing the campaign strategy, the units and buildings and various other things involved with the Seljuk Turks. So, the Turks, as it is highlighting here in the green region, hold parts, not all of it, but parts of what is now modern day Turkey, and they are sort of bordered with the Byzantine Empire here, lots of rebel territory, and sort of bordered with Egypt. You will be bordered with Egypt very soon, even if you aren't quite at the beginning. So, it says here, their strengths are outstanding mounted archers and Janissary troops. I apologise if I pronounce anything wrong, by the way, in this video, because I likely will at some point. And weaknesses, lacking in heavy armour and early period infantry. That's what it says. The campaign rules are to hold 45 regions, including the Constantinople region. That's pretty much a given. You're going to be trying to control that anyway at some point. And the Jerusalem region. Pretty similar anyway. So, honestly, if you're going to control 45 regions, they're likely going to be regions you're controlling anyway. So, that's kind of relevant. But just so you know. So, first of all, let's have a look at the units for the Turks. And we'll go on from there. Okay, so these are the troops for Turkey, as you can see on the right hand side here. I think they've got less troops than some other factions, which is an interesting fact, but there we go. That's what I feel like. But anyway, so first unit up is Peasants. Early period, obviously. These are common for every faction, and they have the commonality that they are pretty much useless. Attack, defense, and charge bonus of 1. So really, I just use Peasants as sort of placeholder unit, or if I just desperately need to boost up some public order by having a little bit of a garrison, get Peasants. But they will not really be doing fighting of any sort. As it says here, they're good cannon fodder. Next up, Azabs. High period. It's odd that it goes straight to the high period, but anyway. Poorly armed, light troops expected to guard bridges and roads and support the heavier troops. So, as it says here, these are light troops, so they are faster than your heavier troops. But it does mean that they suffer in terms of attack and defense, which is 5 and 4 respectively. So these guys aren't going to be able to do an amazing job for you. They're not really going to be able to hold a great amount of strength. But, you know what, they're light troops. I don't really use light troops a lot, so I can't really comment on this too much. I prefer heavy infantry. Town Militia. Again, a common unit for all factions. These guys are, you know, pretty solid for guarding towns. Armed with a spear, but little armour. These troops are made up of locals who have been organised to defend their towns. There you go. And their defence is alright. It's 7. So they'll be able to hold a town, you know, a little bit. They'll be able to help out. And the fact they're spearmen means they're naturally a bit defensive anyway, which I quite like. These guys aren't going to be winning battles for you out on the field, that is for sure. Spear Militia. Relatively similar, to be honest. Attack of 5, defence of 7. Obviously, these are spearmen as well. Bonus fighting cavalry, which is sort of synonymous with spearmen in this game and in real life. And again, little armour. So, very similar, honestly. A defensive unit. They aren't going to be winning loads and loads of fights for you. But if you want a solid, cheap unit to hold a little bit of, you know, strength against you, yeah, Spear Militia, they'll do a little bit of a job. Halberd Militia, late period. These townsfolk carry long halberds, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, that can fend, it looks like an axe if that's what you're wondering, that fend off cavalry and crush the most heavily armoured of foes. 7 attack, 8 defence, so the defence is relatively similar to the other militia unit that we just looked at, but they are effective against armour, which is pretty cool, and the axemen generally are effective against armour in this game, and that's good in the later game because obviously you've got more heavily armoured troops, but still, their attack only being of 7 means they are slightly underwhelming, that is for sure. So, Saracen Militia are up next, well armoured, so this is much better on the defence, as you can see it's 14. Well armoured townsfolk, these spearmen can take care of themselves on the battlefield and fill out any army. So, as we looked at the previous spearmen, the militia units and all that, they are good for holding towns and, you know, basically towns and small cities. These guys can actually do a job out on the battlefield as a good defensive unit that can hold the line. And one of the reasons for this is they can do a skiltrum, which is, I've described this before, it's relatively similar to a phalanx. It's a sort of defensive unit which spearmen use. Attack of 7 and a charge bonus of 3 is solid as well, but obviously spearmen are more synonymous with their defence and their formations, which is evident here. Janissary Heavy Infantry, trained in many weapons, which is pretty cool. These Janissaries fight, I really hope I'm pronouncing that right. fight with a halberd, which we've seen before, and are protected by mail armour. So their attack is 12, which if you look at the halberd militia is a lot better, so a much better attack on them. Their defence is, again, not as good as the Saracen Militia, but still better than the halberd militia, because obviously this isn't a militia unit. And of course the main advantage of these guys, they're also effective against armour, but good morale and very good stamina means they can hold their ground a lot more in a sort of defensive situation, although I would imagine this is more of an offensive unit. Oh, blimey, pronunciation time. Okay. Hashshashin. I'm only going to say that once. That really sounds dodgy. Anyway, they are a semi-religious sect of the stealthy assassins. On the battlefield, they fight with a sword and shield. As a bit of a tongue twister there. Anyway, attack of 16, which is very, very good, and a defense of 21, which is also very, very good, with hit points of 2. Now, these guys may seem amazing on the, just by looking at the stats, but I sometimes find these units can be illusory. If you've played Rome Total War, you'll remember the Arcani. They on paper look brilliant. They're sort of stealthy assassins as well, that have good morale and very good stamina like these guys, but the fact they've only got 30 of them in a unit, which you can see there, or, it depends on what unit scale you play, but it's basically half the amount of any other unit of infantry. It means they can't really hold their own in a fight. Plus, they're very expensive. You look at comparatively the price of these guys. Let's have a look at some spear militia or halberd militia. 500 florins. These guys are 800 florins, 840 to be precise. For only 30 men in a unit, you can get double the amount of men with, under half the amount of florins. So, to be honest, I'd rather have 2 units, 2 solid units than 1 very good unit like this, which also is quite small. So I find, these units can be quite illusory as to how good they are. I personally wouldn't recommend units which have such a small amount of troops in them. But you look at the stats, they are very good, so that is pretty cool. They're certainly going to strike fear into the enemy to some extent. Another dodgy word. Okay, dismounted Sipahi Lancers. I'm sorry, I'm not Turkish, I don't know. Anyway, dismounted cavalry fighting on foot as competent armoured spearmen. Attack of 9, which again, pretty solid, but the defense of 15 is very, very solid. Coupled with good morale and good stamina and a bonus fighting cavalry, they kind of have the advantages of the axemen in the sense that they are, decent in the attack, but they also have the advantage of the spearmen in the sense they're good at defense and they have a bonus fighting cavalry. So, although they are, of course, spearmen themselves, so you would expect that. But they have a bit more punch to them, unlike some of the other spearmen which we've looked at earlier. And a charge bonus of 4 is really cool, by the way. Okay, now on to the archers. Peasant Archers, again, a unit which is in a lot of factions roster. I think pretty much all of them, to be honest. These guys, I don't actually mind Peasant Archers. They can do a little bit of a job because they've got a missile attack of 5, which is pretty underwhelming, but they're peasants, what do you expect? Very low upkeep, etc, etc. They're in the melee, they are completely incompetent though. Attack of 2, defense of 1, charge bonus of 1. What I find interesting though is the Peasant Archers are actually better in the melee than the normal peasants. But obviously these guys are cheaper to have. And these guys don't have poor morale, whereas these peasants do. So it really shows how bad the normal peasants are. Peasant Archers though, I mean they're solid, but there are much better archers in the game. Obviously, they're decent as an early game unit though. Turkish Javelinmen. Turkish Javelinmen are light troops, as you would imagine, used to harass the enemy archers and enemy flanks from a distance. Higher missile attack than the Peasant Archers, because they have a missile attack of 6, and they are more competent in the melee, with an attack of 6 and a defense of 6, and they're effective against armour, which is pretty good for an early game troop, I would say. I don't mind Javelinmen, I would always prefer archers, but the fact that they can skirmish a bit means they are quite cool indeed. Naferton. Now this is, I would say, is kind of a favourite of a lot of people. And the reason this is so, well, there's a few reasons to be honest. But as you can see, missile attack of 23. You compare that to the Peasant Archers, it's nearly 5 times greater missile attack. And they're available in the early period, as it says there. These men throw deadly pots of flaming naphtha, whatever that is, that can seep through any armour. And also, they're good in the melee as well. Attack of 13, defense of 12, charge bonus of 3, good morale and good stamina. Now these guys are good, and if you get a good couple of them, as I say, the missile attack is really, really, really cool. But again, if they're not going to be holding any lines or anything, they are good for 1 they're good for like a single purpose basically, which is their high missile attack. But as I said earlier, with these guys, the fact that they are only have 20 in a unit, which is even less, means they're not going to be highly effective in every battle. But if you use them situationally, yes, they could do a huge amount of damage in a very, very small amount of time, which is really cool indeed. Okay, Turkish Archers. Attack of 6, defense of 10. Defense of 10 for normal archers in the early period is pretty good, by the way. Missile attack of 7, again, is pretty solid. What I like about these guys are long-range missiles, which is not evident with the Peasant Archers. So if you get them up on a hill, they can really fire from a long distance. By the time the enemy actually get to you, whether that's at the walls or the gates of a building, or whether it's on the battlefield, you've already done a solid amount of damage and a solid amount of morale debuff as well. So Turkish Archers, very solid indeed. Next up, Ottoman Infantry. Hardy soldiers, well armed and well armoured. That's a bit odd, but yeah, you get what I mean. They fight with both bows and swords. And these guys, again, in the melee are very, very solid, which is good for sort of a unit which has a missile attack. The missile attack is 9 with long-range missiles, which I've already discussed is pretty good. Attack of 11, defense of 17. Defense of 17 for sort of an infantry archery unit. That's very good. Defense of 17 for any unit is pretty good. So yeah, certainly for a unit which has got a missile attack as well, very solid indeed. Janissary Archers. Shower the enemy with arrows, weakening and breaking formations before the infantry move in. I need to think before I speak sometimes. The attack of 10 and defense of 13, again another solid archer unit in the melee. Attack of 10, but what I like, again, long range missiles, good morale, very good stamina, and they can use their sharpened stakes, which is good when you're trying to defend the settlement or something like that. That special ability is really quite cool indeed. I like that. Effective against Mongols, by the way, which will be pretty useful as we'll discuss later. Janissary Musketeers, late period obviously. They were quick to adopt firearms and use them with the same expertise they had with their bows. So the same people basically, but they've upgraded their weapon. And their upgraded musket now has a missile attack of 17, which is very, very good. And of course it's still long range. And they've still got their good melee attacks. They are the same people, basically. Attack of 12, defense of 14. So yeah, very good. Obviously, these are the sort of musketeer class of units, so they're obviously going to have a better missile attack than basic archers. So yeah, these guys are pretty good, I would say. Late period people are called hand gunners. Somewhat inaccurate, but capable of firing a powerful shot, because they're gunners. The noise and smoke from these handguns can demoralise enemy troops. And that's really, really good as well. I like that. And they're effective against armour. Obviously, it's a sort of gun. It's going to be effective against sort of medieval armour, I would imagine. Very similar melee stats to the previous units. I won't really go over that. Missile attack of 13 is good. For a gun, you would think it's higher, but it's still good. And these guys are better for just like the morale debuffs, as the sort of description kind of alluded to. So if any unit which lowers the morale, because morale is so important in Total War, particularly in this Total War, I would say, the fact that you can debuff morale is a pretty good thing. Onto the cavalry. Oh, these guys again. Okay, Sipahi, Lancers, better suited to hand-to-hand combat than their archer counterparts, which we saw earlier. Attack of 11, defense of 15. Defense of 15 for cavalry is good, but these are like late period lads, I think. So that's the reason why. It can form a wedge, good morale, and good stamina. A solid unit, but there are obviously a lot better cavalry in the game. So for their price, probably not the best. This is a weakness of the Turks, I would say. Early bodyguard. Obviously, these are the people that are bodyguarding, protecting the general. Men dedicated to protecting the general, handpicked for loyalty and valour. So obviously they're going to have good stats. 14 attack, 18 defense with 2 hit points and a charge bonus of 5. Good morale, well armoured, very good stamina. Pretty much the same for all factions. These guys are going to be strong, but not particularly numerous. As you can see, only 20 in a unit. Unless it's the faction leader, in which case they'll have more. And then the late period bodyguard, basically the same. I won't really go over it. It's just a slight upgrade, as you can see. Slight upgrade to the defense. Interestingly, the attack has gone down, which is... that's fascinating. But yeah, a slight upgrade for the later bodyguard. Oh, another hard unit to pronounce. The only thing I don't like about Medieval 2 Total War is I don't really know the pronunciations. Kapakulu, I'm going to say. Elite household guards, well armoured and equipped with maces. They're good for tough opponents in hand-to-hand combat. Attack of 13, defence of 18. So this is where the cavalry starts to get really a lot better. As you can see, the 18 defence is very, very good. Good morale, well armoured, very good stamina. These guys are hard to break down. They look hardy, and that is because they are. Turkish horse archers. Now, I love horse archers. That is one of my favourite things in Total War, particularly in Rome Total War. My favourite faction is Scythia. So anything to do with horse archers, I love. These guys, and they can just be so overpowered. It's ridiculous. It's just awesome. Anyway, a missile attack of 6, which is not bad for early horse archers. It's okay. Attack of 6, defense of 3. Obviously, these guys aren't going to be good in the melee. Particularly early horse archers aren't going to be good in the melee. So what do you really expect? But these guys can do a tremendous amount of damage to infantry troops just by skirmishing around them and firing missiles. They're better obviously in the open field than in towns because they can get stuck on the streets and all that. But as long as you keep them skirmishing out the melee combat, they can do a good amount of damage and not get any hits against them themselves. Solid unit indeed. Turkmens, a bit of an upgrade now. The same missile attack but better in the melee. So this means, as I was saying just then, the previous unit, if they get stuck in the melee, they're kind of screwed. Not the case with these guys. Attack of 7 and defense of 8 is solid. It's not amazing, it's solid. For a horse archer in the early period though, I'd say it's pretty damn good indeed. Good stamina, fast moving. Obviously you don't want to use these guys in the melee unless you have to, but very, very similar. They can do a good amount of damage. I rate Turkmens, I do. These geezers again, but these are the horse archer version of them. Mobile, less mobile than other horse archers, better suited to hand-to-hand fighting, and you can see that because they've got better melee attack and defense. But I actually like these guys. The fact that they can fire a missile, yeah, okay, they're not quite as fast, which means that they can get caught a little bit more, but they can hold their own in the melee, so it kind of compensates. Right, so the rest of it is just the siege equipment and the cannons and all that. I've gone through that in the first episode of the faction guides, which was England. So if you want to have a look at that, go ahead and watch that video. But I'm not going to go over the same stuff every single video. We've looked at the main troops of Turkey, or the Seljuk Turks, and I think that is good enough for this episode. But yeah, you can find them on other episodes if you want to. So let's have a look at the sort of video that comes before the Turkish campaign, and then I'll talk about some strategy.
The nomadic tribes of the Turks are scattered throughout the world. Fierce warriors, they value wisdom and seek to both conquer and enlighten the world. Fierce in battle, but wildly independent, it will take the skills of a great leader to unite the Turks into an empire.
Okay, so here we are. This is the starting position for the Seljuk Turks. Something I should have mentioned, by the way, at the beginning of the video is, of course, Seljuk Turks have the religion of Islam. They are Islamic. So that kind of does determine where you want to expand to a certain extent. Now, starting regions, we have Iconium over here, Caesarea, Yerevan, Mosul. So the Turks start off with a decent amount of settlements, in fact, spread over a relatively large area. It's an interesting starting position, for sure. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn off the fog of war, just so I can show you what is around. As I said in previous videos, I don't play with the fog of war off, but it's just so I can point, okay, this is down here, and you can actually see it rather than it just be a blank screen, pretty much. So yeah, I'll do that right now, and there we go. So we can now see what's going on. And as was evident on the first page, and what I said was there is a lot of rebel territory around. Damascus, Aleppo, Antioch, Adana, Edessa, Trebizond. I wouldn't expand up here. We'll explain that in a second. We have the Byzantine Empire here, or Byzantine. I like to pronounce it Byzantine, so I'm sorry if you don't like that. Yeah, we have the Byzantine Empire over here. Constantinople obviously is a big starting point. And Nicaea, I think that's how you pronounce it, Nicaea, well, they're actually on your territory, so a little bit of a threat right there. You also have Nicosia, slightly different. Nicosia over here, that shouldn't be too much of a threat, but it is Byzantine, as you can see. And then to the south, we have the Egyptians, Gaza, Alexandria, Cairo, etc., etc. So this is interesting. So where would I expand first? Well, there's really two directions you can expand in. What I wouldn't do is expand north. Kind of pointless, to be honest. Yes, you could capture some rebel territory, but they're very far spread out. Sarkel and Ryazan and Bulgar, they're very far away. And the Russians will want them, the Poles will want them, maybe even the Hungarians will want some of these. There's no point scrapping for land which is so far away from each other when there is better land that is closer over here. So yeah, my advice is don't expand north until, maybe the later game. But you've got a nice natural barrier. You can go and take Tbilisi over here and Trebizond for sure. But what I mean is beyond these mountains, which I believe are the Caucasus Mountains. I don't know. Caucasus Mountains. Maybe. I don't know. My geography maybe isn't brilliant. Beyond these mountains, I wouldn't expand. You've got a nice natural barrier here. Don't spoil it, is my opinion. So you have two ways to expand, essentially. You have the expand west option, which is to go for the Byzantine Empire, which is relatively weak in the sense that it's got a lot of factions surrounding it that probably want a peace, like Hungary and Venice and yourself. Obviously, I've discussed this in the Venice video, the previous one, that the Byzantines are weak in that aspect because they're completely surrounded. So you could take advantage, go for Nicaea early on, and go for Constantinople early on. Obviously, taking rebel settlements like Smyrna, Rhodes, places like that along the way, and you could consolidate a solid Turkish Empire along here. And that is a very viable option. Constantinople, good region for trade. Obviously, it's one of the biggest cities. I think it is the biggest city in the whole game starting off. So there are obviously positives for going with that option, for sure. But what would I do? Well, I actually would expand down south first, towards Egypt. And there's several reasons why. First of all, lots of rebel territory over here, which is nice to take. Adana, I've explained them already. All along the coast, and you can get very profitable. Just look how many settlements. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 settlements just for the taking along here. The rebel settlements aren't as easy to take as they were in Rome Total War, but still, like Damascus, that won't be that easy to take, but you have some relatively strong armies, which we'll look at in a second. If you consolidate them, recruit a little bit, you should have enough, I would say, to take these over time. The reason why I'd go for the Egyptians first is they are going to attack you. Like yourselves, they only have rebel territory around them. They're not going to expand this way. It's very unlikely. Huge expanse of land for basically little point really. They're more likely to expand up here and then to the north towards you. And that means they're going to be a threat anyway, so you might as well neutralise them or take them out before they become too much of a threat, because they're going to attack you anyway. Also, you are Islamic, as I stated earlier, and the Byzantines are not. Meaning it's easier to take Gaza, Cairo and Alexandria and then keep them with low garrisons. So you have the advantage of taking out a faction early on, which is going to be a threat to you later, and the fact that once you've got those settlements, you don't have to worry too much about public order because they're the same religion as you, whereas the Byzantine Empire isn't. So if you want to expand beyond the Byzantine Empire, you need to keep some garrison there or do some religious stuff, and that could be problematic, expensive or impractical. But for sure, once you've moved out of Egypt, then it is definitely time to move towards the Byzantine Empire. You want Constantinople taking Nicaea along the way, and then yes, I would absolutely feast on the Byzantine Empire, which should at that point already be struggling over here, having moved a lot of its force to Durazzo and Thessalonica, because the Venetians are causing trouble after they've taken Zagreb and possibly Sofia. And the Hungarians moving down south from Bucharest will probably cause them some problems as well, meaning it will be relatively weak, and you can then take settlements such as Nicosia, which as you can see hasn't really got a big force on it, two units. So don't take that early on because you don't want to get into war with the Byzantines early on, but as soon as you declare war you can just hop over to Nicosia, take that, thank you very much, as another settlement to the pack. So that's the two places I'd expand early on, Byzantines and the Egyptians. And that will take quite a lot of time, I would imagine. And then you've got a solid empire. Then the Mongols come along and try and screw everything up. And the Mongols are strong, obviously. They are likely to take a few of your settlements, possibly. It depends how good you are at the game. The only advantage you have, really, is the fact that it is mountain passes which are very, very tight. So you can kind of trap certain armies over there, pin them down, like so, in these passages over here, and they'll kind of struggle to get past you. And if you have a strong army, you can do a bit of a job. Also, something I've read up on before is that some Mongol armies are pretty much just horse archers. I mean, they move faster than their other units. The advantage the Mongols have is that they are in a pack. They have 5 or 6 armies close to each other. But if the horse archers get ahead, you can pick them off with like flaming arrows or whatever. You can pick them off, and then once their reinforcements come along, they're not quite as scary anymore. The main Mongol troops, the horse archers, they've been kind of neutralised. Furthermore, generals with the Knights Fighter trait are particularly good in this region. As I said just a second ago, Mongols like to fight in packs, 3, 4, 5 armies at a time. But if you use the Knight Fighter, you can pick off single weaker armies one by one, and they won't have any reinforcements. That's sort of another piece of advice. Other than that, it's kind of just reinforcing settlements like Yerevan and Mosul, and just trying to build them up as big as possible with as bigger walls, and just trying to stop them at the gates. Eventually, I mean, to be honest, they're not going to expand all across here. I don't think they will. You might have to recapture Mosul and Yerevan at some point. It depends how good you are at the game, I suppose. That's sort of my advice on the Mongols. Haven't really fought the Mongols too many times on Medieval 2 Total War, sorry. So I can't comment too much, but that is kind of the general advice I would give. So there you go, that's pretty much all I have to say about the Seljuk Turks. So yeah, that is basically just a very quick overview of the Seljuk Turks. I wanted to keep it relatively concise and not go on for ages. My general advice is go for Egypt and then Byzantines, but you can do it the other way around if you want to. I just wouldn't advance north is basically my only advice. You can't really advance any other way, so you can't really go too far wrong, in my opinion, with the Seljuk Turks. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back with more videos very, very soon. See you around.